Welcome to True Drew Podcast, your source for all things Nancy Drew. I'm your host, Avery, and on this podcast, we'll discuss everything from the Nancy Drew books, to computer games, to movie adaptations, and TV shows. Nothing is off the table. So if you're a True Drew, you'll definitely want to tune in for this podcast. Hello again, True Drews. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day, because I'm having a fantastic day. I don't know about you, but it's been pretty nice. Today was actually my day off. I went and got a facial, and I don't think I've had a facial in like 12 years since I got married. So it's been long overdue. The enzymes are enzyming. My face smells like raspberry jam right now, and I'm not upset about it. So this is your sign to be self-aware and self-care. But really quickly, that is not entirely why I'm having a fantastic day, because I had a facial, but because I went to a used bookstore and had like the find of my lifetime. Now, if you follow me over on my Instagram, which is True Drew Podcast, this is going to be old news to you, but if you don't, it's going to be like brand new news. But I went to this used bookstore today and I found not one, not two, but 11 Applewood edition Nancy Drew books. I was and am super excited about this, because what this means is that these are original texts. Even though they were printed in 1991, they made them to be like the original classic Nancy Drew books. So they're very different from the revised editions, which is what we mostly talk about on this podcast. So at some point during this podcast, we're going to go back and do those first 10 books and do an episode for each one. So I just had to share that with you guys. I am so excited about it. Now, on to the mystery at hand today, which we're going to be discussing, and that is the Clue of the Dancing Puppet. So this is the 39th book in the Nancy Drew series, and this one came out in 1962. So, as always, I like to discuss the different Nancy Drew book covers for each book, and what I'm finding is, the later we get in the series, the less book covers there are, because there were less revisions and less additions. But this cover that I found shows Nancy in this pale blue or white dress. It's kind of hard to tell, but she's got a flashlight and she's shining it on this marionette, this puppet that's dressed in like a ballet costume, and there's a super creepy looking black hooded figure hiding in the trees, and we're outside of this mansion or this estate where the mystery takes place, and Nancy has, I would say, like true red hair here. Now, I was also able to find this really interesting English cover, which I had never seen before, but it is something else. It's got Nancy, and she's got like this shaggy haircut and bangs, and she's wearing like a khaki jumpsuit is what it looks like. It's very mechanic is what it's giving, but there's this this puppet behind her, like bursting out of this closet, and he's like got this ruff around his neck and lace cuffs at the hands, and he's got like, I don't know, he looks like a jester, but if anything like that popped out of a closet, it would probably give me the same reaction that Nancy has on this cover. She looks terrified. So I did come up with a funny cover spoof for this one, and I just said, what in the Geppetto is going on here? Like, I know Pinocchio is the actual puppet and Geppetto is the man who carved him, but it's like, that is the focal point of this mystery. We're trying to figure out, like, not only where these puppets came from, but who is controlling them. And it's a little creepy. I kind of like my husband's cover spoof too, because I ask him occasionally, I'll just show him the book cover and cover up the title, and I'll just be like, what would you call this? And he just said, Toy Story 5. So for my cover rating, I gave both these covers 2 magnifying glasses. They're just not my favorite. I don't know. I don't like puppets. Maybe it's because I've been exposed to magician circles, but there's a lot of puppets. There's a lot of ventriloquist dummies, and it's just not my thing. So when I picked up this book to read it for the podcast, I couldn't remember anything about it. I was just like, it's like so many of the books. Like, there's only the first 10 or so that really stick in my brain, and then there's these, and I'm just like, well, there's a puppet involved, but I don't know anything else about the plot. So let's go ahead and jump into our cast of characters for the Clue of the Dancing Puppet. So we have Hamilton Spencer, who is an actor, and his wife, Margot. There is also Janet Wood, who is the secretary for the Footlighters. They're just this acting guild they put on plays. There is Tammy Whitlock, who is also in this acting guild, and I won't tell you what I put in parentheses next to her name. I was just like, Tammy's a witch. She's not very nice. There's also Emmett Calhoun, another actor who is also Old Cali Boy. There is Bob Simpson, Owen Whipley, who is apparently a car owner. That comes up later in the book. John Terrell and Sam Longman, who are quote-unquote thieves, and Kathy Cromwell, Tammy's understudy for the play. So I wrote out a synopsis for this one, but it's kind of on the short side, so I'll go ahead and read it. Hamilton Spencer, an old actor in the Footlighters acting group, comes to Nancy with a mystery. The Van Pelt mansion, where they have their theater, is being haunted by a bizarre marionette-style puppet. Nancy joins the theater troupe and gets whisked into the mystery. Her car gets hit, large puppets are seen everywhere, some strange guy keeps quoting Shakespeare all the time, and an actress named Tammy is a prima donna. People use aliases, again. Some guy has a weird snake-shaped scar, and when Nancy finally rounds the crime ring up and finally finds the last puppet, the only thing in it is papers on how to make fuel cells that run on aluminum. Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure that was valuable information at the time and could still be valuable and used today. But still, like, I don't know. I'm more a fan of, like, Nancy finding jewels or, like, lost treasure. I don't know. That's just more appealing to me than some scientific secret. So the newspaper headline synopsis that I came up with is To Be or Not to Be, Crime Ring Apprehended and Mystery of Puppets at Mansion Solved. So I took some direct notes and quotes down for the clue of the dancing puppet. Let's jump right into them. So the first thing that I took down, because it's so unfortunate and it's so prevalent in these older books, is it's the first page and Bess is reducing in order to get a part in a play. If Bess Marvin was a real person, I would find her and track her down and just personally apologize for Carolyn Keene and for all of the ghostwriters that wrote Bess this way, because I'm like, why is she reduced to this trope of just like constantly dieting? And I'm sorry, like if Hamilton Spencer can't figure out how much of a queen Bess is, then, you know, she didn't want to be in his play anyway. Also, just for comparison's sake, George is apparently in a tennis tournament. Like, I love that they're, like, mentioned synonymously on the same page. It's like, Bess is dieting, and George, she's just in a tennis tournament. I guess that got a mention because George is a tomboy, and that fits into her archetype for her character, but still. So, the next thing that I wrote down is Nancy gets knocked out by a trunk with a cannonball in it that falls on her head in the Van Pelt Mansion's attic. And we're up to, like, 10 or 11, like, blows to the head, and Nancy has not gone to the doctor once. It's a little bit concerning. So, this next thing is hilarious, but Emmett Calhoun's nickname that Mr. Spencer gave him is Cali Old Boy, and every time I read that, I couldn't help but read it like this. I would just be like, Cali Old Boy, can you put on some tea? Or Cali Old Boy, do you want to go play some polo? Like, I'm sorry, but what in the Jay Gatsby is this? Like, it's in the same vein of Old Sport, you know? It's just very pompous and very, like, I don't know. I'm not here for it. Even though, for the record, I love The Great Gatsby. Fantastic book. So Nancy's been hit in the head, and then just imagine this, if you will. This person just comes up and starts quoting Shakespeare, and I was like, I'm sorry, if I get hit in the head and someone starts quoting Shakespeare to me, I'm gonna smack them in the face. To be or not to be? That is the question. No, the question is, are you going to call the hospital, or do I have to do it myself? So already the cons are greatly outweighing the pros when it comes to solving this mystery. I mean, Nancy's been hit in the head. This guy is relentlessly quoting Shakespeare. And then Nancy gets a call warning her and telling her to leave the property. And it's like in a witch voice. It's super creepy. So the person on the phone is basically like, I'm the dancing puppet. If you know what's good for you, Nancy Drew, you'll leave me alone. Get out. Go away. Like, see, if you got a phone call like that, wouldn't that make you want to leave? So this Footlighters actors group, they are putting on a Civil War play. And so I just said, okay. And apparently Tammy has a thing for Bob and didn't want Nancy and George to join the group. And then apparently old Cali boy has a thing for Tammy. So there's all these people liking other people. And the only reason Tammy wanted Nancy and George to not be in the group is because she's basically trying to keep anyone of the female persuasion away from Bob. So Nancy and George find more cannonballs in a chest in the hayloft. It's like somebody's moving these things around, and there's, these puppets keep showing up and stuff. It's very weird. We're kind of starting to get the feeling that somebody is trying to run off the theater group. They don't want them to be in the house because they're trying to find something, and so they're just trying to cause a lot of chaos. So it's at this point in the book when Nancy, Bess, and George decide to drive their car away from the mansion and walk back to confuse any puppeteers that might be around. But then their car gets hit by another car. They just hit them and then they leave. And so Nancy takes her car to get fixed by someone named Joe, and apparently he went to school with her. I just think it's so interesting in these books when there's someone that Nancy went to school with and they just randomly show up and end up crossing her path. It's just kind of cool. It's like they took the route of becoming a mechanic, and here's Nancy and she's just solving mysteries. So Nancy runs into Hamilton Spencer outside at night. He's watching to see if the puppeteer is going to show up, and they do see the dancing puppet, but it gets away. And this thing is like lifelike. It's very creepy because it's like almost the size of a person is what they describe it as. I don't know. I'd run in the other direction. But the next day, Nancy, Bess, and George check out the hayloft, and they see that the cannonballs are gone, so someone's been there, and there's a witch puppet in its place. So Nancy at this point is beginning to realize, like, okay, there's different puppets, because the puppet I saw last night was wearing like a ballet costume, and then this one looks like a witch. So where are all these puppets coming from? So this next note that I wrote down is Tammy harasses Nancy about just being there, being around. She just doesn't want her there to solve this mystery. And George tells her off. She's basically like, you think you're so important? I don't even want to talk to you. And she just like George tells Tammy where to get off. I also thought it was really interesting because Hannah Gruen calls Tammy a tartar, and I had never heard of that. I've only heard of that like tartar sauce. I was like, what is a tartar? And I looked it up, and it's apparently a person of irritable or violent temper. Well, we can check that box off because Tammy is definitely both of those things. So Bess does get a part as the maid in the play, and she gets excited about eating at the Drews, and Nancy says a certain young lady who's been asked to play a part in the new show might lose her chance if she gained too many pounds. I was shocked at this because this is the first time that I've really heard Nancy say something like this. Usually it's always George. And Nancy, like, it says she said it sweetly or nicely, but I'm like, there's really no nice way to say that to somebody. I was just like, I wish that none of this existed, but I hate that this is in these books. We need justice for Bess Marvin. So the girls finally get a call from Joe at the service station, and a car with matching fender damage has been brought in, and it's the car that hit Nancy's. So we're getting closer to figuring out who hit them. Remember that character that I read off, Owen Whipley, and I just said car owner? It's that guy. My next note just says Kathy and Bob are flirting and Bess notices. So Kathy is Tammy's understudy, and so when Bess notices this, she's like, oh crap, like the stuff's gonna hit the fan. It's gonna be like really bad if Tammy figures this out. Meanwhile, old Cali boy is pining away for Tammy, and she has no idea. So the next thing that I wrote down is some guy named Chuck picks Tammy up, and Nancy and George follow and end up at Green Acres, a restaurant. It's apparently the place to be, if you know what I mean. So Nancy overhears them talking about having a job to do, and it turns out that Chuck sings there. And shortly after Nancy figures this out, two men run out, and a woman says they stole her necklace. So George blocks their car with Nancy's car, like she just got it back from the shop, but let's just block this car so they can't get out. Luckily they don't ram the car or try to get out, but the police come and they don't find the necklace, and the men were John Terrell and Sam Longman. They'll come back to play in just a little bit. So Nancy and George leave the restaurant, and they see sawhorses in the road, and these masked men tell them to leave the theater, and Nancy figures out that it's got to be the two guys that just came from the restaurant. So Nancy talks to Chief McGinnis, she calls him later, her, and she gets a description of Owen Whipley. He's actually John Terrell. Dun dun dun, it's an alias. So my next note is Mr. Spencer rigs a bell in Nancy's room to ring if he sees the puppet. Like, instead of just shouting up the stairs, I mean, I guess he would scare off anybody that was out there with the puppet, but he'll just ring it. And so they see the puppet, and there's a hooded figure that gets away, and Nancy circles a footprint with stones so she can come back and find it later. But when they do come back with the police, of course the footprint is gone, but she does find the black cloak up in a tree because she starts thinking, and she's like, the thief couldn't have gotten away, like the puppeteer couldn't have gotten away this fast, so he had to have gone up in the tree. Okay, so this next note, the girls are eating breakfast, and old Cally boy says, "Good morning, ladies. Prithee, fair maidens, extend a hungry man a crust to lift his spirits." Oh my gosh, like, I was not kidding. This guy goes around quoting Shakespeare all the time, and I'm sorry, like, he seems incapable of making himself breakfast, like... Anyway, but then he goes on to quote that people are puppets, and I was like, oh man, that is actually deep. I gotta give that to you, old Cally boy. People are puppets. So old Cally boy says Tammy told him no one is allowed in the attic, but Nancy calls around and proves that's a lie. But apparently, like, he will do anything for Tammy just to get her attention, just to be in the same room as her. But Nancy figures out, you know, like, no, we're allowed to go up in the attic. So they go up there, and Nancy finds a puppet. Also, can I just say, old Cally boy has his faults, like he's constantly speaking in iambic pentameter, but I have never seen someone try so hard for a woman that is so unworth it. Like, Tammy is just an awful person. So it's at this point in the book when Tammy gets sick, quote unquote. I don't know if she's actually sick, but Nancy takes her place in the play, and Ned, Bert, Dave, Hannah, and Carson come to see her. And it says that Ned is jealous of Nancy's kissing scene with Bob. Like, he clenches up and gets really, like, he's balling his hands into fists. It's so funny. Ned can always be counted on to be jealous. So, in a epic plot twist, Chuck Grant, the guy who picked Tammy up and took her to the restaurant, is her brother. Did not see that coming. And John Terrell, aka Owen Whipley, is arrested, and Nancy follows a lead to an apartment, and then she finds Sam Longman after saying Green Acres to get him to open the door. Apparently this is the password to get him to open the door. But he almost escapes down a fire escape, but the cops get him. So 2 of the thieves have been captured, and they haul him back up to the apartment, and he's like, you're never going to find the puppet. Like, he's hidden it somewhere, and they're looking around, and Bess is a genius. She finds the puppet shoved in the oven. Like, 3 cheers for Bess Marvin. So they pull the puppet out of the oven, and it has a false back and jewelry in it, and it's the jewelry that that woman said had been stolen from her at the restaurant. Okay, so this next thing is another unfortunate fat-shaming Bess moment, but Bess says she's starving, and George laughs and says, "It would be good for you to go without it. How else can you lose those 20 pounds you keep talking about?" And so Bess rightly gets mad and grabs the mayonnaise, because they're apparently, like, making sandwiches, and George says, "Your rations are 1 piece of lettuce, 1 tomato, and 1 thin slice of roast beef." I'm sorry, but this is so awful to me, and I just wonder how many eating disorders did this encourage in people. It's really messed up, and it's also sad because Bess says, "I've lost 5 pounds," and then she sighs and she tells George that she's right and wants to get a better role in the play. And so I just wrote down, you deserve to eat. Like, you, whoever's listening to this, you deserve to eat. And if anyone ever talks to you this way, like, they're not a good friend, period. So the next thing that I wrote down is Nancy finds Ralph Van Pelt's diary in the attic, and apparently back in the 1800s he made these puppets and hid a valuable secret in one of them. And they also discover the puppet they found before is gone, and they hear this eerie laugh. Like the phone call with that witch's voice, this eerie laugh, getting hit in the head with cannonballs. Like, Nancy Drew will stay through this, but if it were me, I'd be gone, long gone by this point. So this next thing, this kind of freaked me out a little bit. I thought it was an actual puppet, but it was a person. So Nancy thinks she sees the puppet on stage dancing, but it's Tammy, and she's pissed. And she starts punching Nancy, and it turns out that she's involved with this crime ring, basically. And Emmett Calhoun found the diary and wanted to impress her with the knowledge of something valuable because he liked her. See, again, like, Tammy is totally unworthy of Emmett's affections. Like, she just manipulated him to get that information. It's so messed up. So Nancy finds the last puppet, and it has papers on fuel cells that can run on melted aluminum. And I just said, okay. And that money will go to the Footlighters, I guess, because they own the mansion. I don't know. But the book says at the very end that the next mystery in the series is the Moonstone Valley mystery, but it's actually the Moonstone Castle mystery. So a lot of the times in these Nancy Drew books, you'll see it in some of them, they would name the next mystery before it's even been printed. And then, of course, they would go back to the drawing board and they would inevitably change the name, but they would forget, oh no, we already said that it was named this at the end of the last book. So just an interesting fact. So the next part of this podcast is a section I like to call What's Cooking with Hannah Gruen. And Hannah actually made several things in this book. She made roast and apple snow pudding. I kind of want to know what that is. Ham and eggs, fruit salad, tomato soup, hamburgers and cake, steak and mac and cheese, oranges, bananas, bacon, and blueberry muffins. Like, Hannah cooked up a storm. Now, as for the add that to your resume section, I said that Nancy could add actress to her resume because she apparently did a pretty decent job filling in for Tammy. Now, unfortunately, I feel like I've been a bit of an actress, but not a very good one, because I don't know if you can tell through this episode, I had to kind of act like I liked this one. I did not really like this book, but let's go ahead and quickly discuss the things that I did like about The Clue of the Dancing Puppet and the things I didn't. So the thing that I liked, I just said Old Cali Boy. I thought his name was kind of dumb, but bless him, like, he wanted to have Tammy reciprocate his feelings, but she didn't. But, he's really good at quoting Shakespeare. He kept this book interesting. I'll give him that. Now, the thing I didn't like, and you probably already guessed it, this book just kind of dragged. It really didn't have a very clear, it had a clear and concise plot, but it wasn't an interesting one to me. It didn't have that, that thing that I look for in Nancy Drew mysteries, that suspense. So you probably already guessed it, but I gave this book a magnifying glass rating of 1 magnifying glass. It wasn't a good book. I liked Old Cali Boy, but aside from that, I was like, this one's pretty forgettable. So for next week's episode number 45, oh my gosh, we're going to be talking about the Moonstone Castle mystery. So if you like missing persons and abandoned castles, you're going to love this one. Until next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of True Drew Podcast. If you'd like to stay up to date on the latest information and new episodes, our Instagram is True Drew Podcast. Or for general inquiries, you can email us at truedrewpodcast@gmail.com.